Daniel Hargrove thought he was directing the perfect crime, and Marcus Vale believed he was about to produce the greatest story of his career, but neither of them expected the script to end in real blood inside a silent home theater in Millbrook. Millbrook was the kind of town where nothing ever seemed to happen, where neighbors waved from trimmed lawns and nights were quiet by 10. That calm shattered just after sunrise when police cars lined the curved driveway of Daniel Hargrove's hillside mansion. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off tall glass windows, turning the peaceful neighborhood into something that looked like a film set. Inside the house, officers moved carefully through spotless rooms until they reached the private home theater at the back of the property. Daniel sat motionless in a wide leather chair, facing a massive screen frozen on the final frame of an old crime movie. A half-finished glass of wine rested on the table beside him. The room was dim, the curtains sealed shut, the only glow coming from the paused screen. There were no signs of struggle, no broken furniture, no forced doors or windows. Everything was perfectly in place, almost too perfect. At first, responders believed he had suffered a heart attack during the movie, but something felt wrong. Daniel was only 46, fit, and known for his strict health routine. The medical examiner later confirmed a rare toxin in his bloodstream, one that worked slowly and left little trace without advanced testing. Whoever planned this understood timing, chemistry, and staging. The mansion's security system had not recorded any intruders. The doors were locked from the inside. It looked less like a violent act and more like a carefully directed final scene. In that silent theater room, detectives realized they were not just investigating a death. They were stepping into a script written with chilling precision. Daniel Hargrove had built his reputation on precision and discipline. He founded a cybersecurity company in his late 20s and sold it a decade later for a fortune that placed him among the wealthiest men in Millbrook. In interviews, he appeared calm and thoughtful, often speaking about innovation and long-term vision. Yet behind the polished image, his personal life had been quietly unraveling. His recent divorce from Laura had ended a 15-year marriage. Though the separation seemed peaceful on the surface, financial records showed tense negotiations over property and investments. Friends described Daniel as increasingly withdrawn in the months before his death. He stopped attending charity events and rarely answered calls. Instead, he spent long hours inside his home theater or locked in his private study. Digital forensics later revealed he had been researching rare poisons, realistic crime scenes in films, and insurance policies related to accidental deaths. One discovery shocked investigators. Just weeks before he died, Daniel changed his will. A large portion of his estate, once promised to medical charities, was redirected to a small independent film studio struggling to stay afloat. The studio was owned by Marcus Vale, an ambitious director with only one low-budget thriller to his name. There was no obvious connection between the two men beyond a brief meeting at a networking event. Yet financial transfers suggested deeper involvement. Detectives began to suspect that Daniel's death was tied not only to money, but to a carefully crafted narrative unfolding behind closed doors. The investigation shifted toward the source of the toxin found in Daniel's body. Laboratory analysis confirmed it was a rare experimental compound, tightly controlled and typically used in specialized medical research. Only 3 facilities within 100 miles stored it, and each kept detailed inventory logs. One lab, located in a private research park outside Millbrook, reported a minor discrepancy in its supply 2 weeks before Daniel's death. The missing amount was small, but enough to be lethal if properly prepared. Security footage from the lab revealed a shadowed figure entering through a staff-access door late at night. The person wore a hooded jacket and gloves, moving with calm, deliberate steps. The access card used to unlock the door belonged to Olivia Chun, a junior lab technician with no criminal record. She insisted she had lost her card days before and had reported it missing to her supervisor. Records showed she did make that report, but it had not yet been deactivated in the system. Olivia had no known connection to Daniel. Phone records, however, revealed she had received multiple anonymous calls in the days leading up to the theft. The calls lasted only seconds, as if testing whether she would answer. Investigators could not trace the numbers. They appeared to be routed through encrypted servers. The more detectives examined the timeline, the more it felt staged. The stolen access card, The precise amount of toxin taken, the careful avoidance of cameras in certain hallways, it all suggested planning far beyond a random act. Someone had created a trail designed to attract attention, but perhaps not to reveal the real truth. Attention returned to Daniel's mansion, where every detail seemed too controlled to be accidental. The home's advanced security system had recorded nothing unusual on the night of his death. No alarms were triggered, no doors opened unexpectedly, and no unknown devices connected to the network. Yet one detail stood out. An interior hallway camera outside the private theater had gone offline for exactly 12 minutes. The malfunction occurred between 9:14 p.m. and 9:26 p.m., the estimated window when the poison would have been administered. The security company responsible for maintaining the system confirmed that a remote software update had been processed that same evening. The request came from the primary authorized account holder. That account belonged to Daniel himself. System logs showed his password was entered correctly on the first attempt from inside the house. There were no signs of hacking or forced digital entry. Whoever initiated the update knew the credentials. Detectives began to question whether Daniel had willingly granted access to someone he trusted. A deeper search of the study uncovered a second phone hidden behind a row of financial documents. The device contained encrypted messaging apps and a single contact labeled only as director. Though most messages were deleted, fragments were recovered through forensic analysis. They referenced phrases like perfect scene, timing must align, and audience must believe it. The tone suggested collaboration rather than threat. Investigators now faced a troubling possibility. The man who appeared to be the victim might have been involved in shaping the very event that ended his life. Marcus Vale quickly became the focus of the investigation. He was known locally as a passionate but struggling filmmaker who believed realism was the key to powerful storytelling. His only released film had gained minor attention online for its dark tone and carefully constructed crime scenes. Financial records revealed that in the months leading up to Daniel's death, Marcus received several large transfers from Daniel's personal accounts. The payments were labeled as development investments for a future project, yet no formal contracts or production schedules were found. When detectives searched Marcus's apartment, they discovered detailed storyboards pinned across an entire wall. The drawings depicted a wealthy man dying alone in a private theater, a glass of wine beside him, a frozen movie frame glowing in the background. The resemblance to Daniel's death was undeniable. Notes scribbled beneath the images described a staged investigation, a missing laboratory toxin, and an innocent technician framed through planted evidence. Metadata on Marcus's computer showed the project files were created nearly 3 months before the fatal night. Marcus claimed Daniel had approached him, fascinated by the idea of blurring fiction and reality. He insisted the similarities were proof of collaboration, not guilt. However, investigators noticed subtle revisions in the script. Early drafts ended ambiguously, while later versions described a confirmed homicide that triggered a massive insurance payout. That change had been made only weeks before Daniel died. The evolving storyline suggested that what began as creative ambition may have shifted into something far more dangerous and irreversible. As forensic specialists reviewed the toxicology report in greater detail, a new layer of complexity emerged. The rare compound in Daniel's bloodstream had been administered in a measured dose, diluted carefully in red wine. The concentration indicated knowledge of chemistry and patience. But alongside the poison, experts detected a mild sedative already in his system before the toxin began to act. That sedative had been legally prescribed to Daniel months earlier to help him sleep. The timing suggested the sedative was taken voluntarily. There were no injection marks, no bruising, and no defensive wounds anywhere on his body. The glass in his hand contained traces of both substances, confirming ingestion rather than force. Investigators began to question whether Daniel had known what he was consuming. Medical records uncovered another secret. Daniel had recently been diagnosed with an early-stage degenerative neurological condition. It was not immediately life-threatening, but it would gradually affect memory and cognitive function. For a man whose identity revolved around intelligence and control, the diagnosis was devastating. Only his physician and a private specialist were aware of it. Friends later described Daniel as increasingly preoccupied with legacy. He had spoken about wanting to be remembered for something extraordinary. Detectives started to consider a disturbing possibility. Perhaps the elaborate staging was not only about money or deception. Perhaps Daniel had been trying to direct the final chapter of his own life, turning his death into a carefully crafted performance that would outlive him. Financial investigators uncovered a detail that shifted the entire case. 3 months before his death, Daniel had purchased a new life insurance policy worth tens of millions of dollars. The contract included a strict clause. The payout would be denied in the event of suicide but fully honored if his death were ruled a homicide. The primary beneficiary was not a family member or former spouse. It was Marcus Vale's film studio. The arrangement immediately raised alarms. If Daniel had taken his own life, the studio would receive nothing. But if investigators concluded he had been murdered, the payout would secure the company's future overnight. It was a risk designed around perception. The difference between suicide and homicide would determine everything. Digital forensic experts recovered deleted email drafts between Daniel and Marcus. The language in those drafts focused heavily on authenticity, believable investigation, and ensuring the authorities see what we intend. Though no message directly described a plan to stage a killing, the tone implied coordination around details that mirrored the crime scene. Meanwhile, Olivia Chun was formally cleared when forensic analysis confirmed she had never physically handled the stolen toxin. Surveillance gaps at the lab revealed that a temporary consultant badge had been issued under a false identity weeks earlier. Payment for that badge traced back to a shell company funded by Daniel. The evidence began pointing toward a carefully constructed illusion. What first appeared to be a murder investigation was slowly revealing itself as a performance engineered for a specific legal outcome. In the final stage of the investigation, prosecutors reconstructed the timeline with chilling clarity. Daniel had arranged access to the research lab using a false identity, obtained the toxin himself, and coordinated with Marcus to build a narrative that would withstand scrutiny. The staged security glitch, the planted trail leading to Olivia, and the detailed film storyboards were all components of a single design. The goal was simple but dangerous. Create a death that would legally qualify as murder, ensuring the insurance payout would fund the film studio and preserve Daniel's chosen legacy. However, one crucial detail did not align with Daniel's careful personality. Forensic analysis revealed the poison concentration in the wine was slightly higher than what Daniel had researched online. Phone metadata placed Marcus near the mansion hours before the estimated time of death. Though there was no forced entry, digital locks showed a temporary access code had been activated remotely through Marcus's device. Investigators concluded that while Daniel intended to stage a controlled homicide scenario, Marcus altered the dosage to remove any uncertainty. He eliminated the possibility that Daniel might survive or reconsider. What began as a calculated performance became a genuine act of murder driven by greed and ambition. Marcus Vale was arrested and charged with homicide and insurance fraud. The life insurance payout was frozen indefinitely. Millbrook was left stunned by a case that blurred fiction and reality. In trying to direct his own cinematic ending, Daniel Hargrove lost control of the story and paid for it with his life.